Okay, hi. So, I was looking for some resources for a friend of mine, and I stumbled upon this, which isn't really what I was looking for, but I want to read it, and I figured I'd go ahead and use it as practice to read it out loud. It's just a paper written by someone named Kylie Alexandra for Sociology 494. She went to University of Hawaii, it looks like. And I just find a lot of these online, these just, papers that people wrote for school. And I love to do that, especially, of course, women. I'm not going to read anything a man wrote. So it's called, I don't know if I already said what it's called, War, Society, and Sexual Violence, a Feminist Analysis of the Origin and Prevention of War Rape. Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and start. Armed conflict is a predictor of sexual violence against women. Rape in war is not a new phenomenon, but the intensity of the violence inflicted upon victims appears to be on the rise. Prior to the 1990s, theorists ignored war rape as a side effect of conflict or as isolated acts of individual soldiers motivated by sexual desire. Heightened attention generated by the efforts of female reporters, activists, and scholars to document the sexual violence committed as part of the civil wars in Rwanda and the former Yugoslavia prompted international outrage. This outrage redirected scholars to understand the origin and dynamics of war rape. War rape is a complex dynamic encompassed by layers of meaning which vary between conflicts. However, many feminist scholars are beginning to argue, there's no punctuation in this, like, at all, for some reason, so I'm having to just kind of guess. Like, there's periods, but there's no commas. However, many feminist scholars are beginning to argue that a common thread underlies most, if not all, manifestations of war rape. Popular explanations for war rape range from sociobiological theory, undergirded, is that a word? By male sexual desire, to strategic or genocidal theory that posits rape as a weapon of war. These theories are inadequate in their explanatory power, and it's insufficient when it comes to exploring ways to prevent war rape. In contrast, feminist theory points to the gendered social, political, and economic hierarchies that produce misogynistic cultural norms, which are exacerbated in the chaos of war. Understanding war rape involves an analysis of the social structures that precede and situate the conflict, and an awareness of how war reifies and celebrates militant masculinity. War rape is an extreme manifestation of cultural and political norms that stratify gender and commodify women. Preventing war rape flows from reconfiguring the entrenched social norms that provide the fertile soil for sexual violence to occur. Throughout this essay, the terms war rape and sexual violence will be used interchangeably, primarily because acts of war rape often coincide with additional forms of sexual violence. According to a UN Development Fund for Women report released in 2002. I'm sorry. I'm going to get better at this. I'm not very good at editing it and going through and clipping this part out, but I will get better at that. I've literally never done video editing at all. According to this report, released in 2002, sexual violence against women in war includes being raped at home or in public, often in front of family members, deliberate HIV infection to contaminate the enemy population, sexual slavery and sex trafficking, and forced impregnation or abortion. Rape includes forced penetration with a penis or other foreign object, such as a stick or weapon, as well as genital stabbing, and can be perpetrated by a single combatant gangs or by series of combatants in the form of sex trafficking of women and girls between soldiers. War rape frequently results in serious physical and psychological harm and can be accompanied by torture, or indeed regarded as torture. Fucking duh. And death. Similarly, for the purpose of this essay, war and armed conflict will be used interchangeably and generally defined as political conflicts which involve at least one state or sub-state armed group. Hence, armed conflicts include both civil and international disputes. This definition is deliberately broad in order to include small-scale conflicts within the analysis, such as the recent spate of violence and retaliatory rapes committed by Guinean armed forces against female political protesters. Moreover, in line with Hines' 2004, she's citing a lot in here. She's citing a lot of different people. She's citing an essay right now. I'm not going to say all the names because the whole thing is just peppered with them. So yeah, I'll read her sources at the end. Sorry. An important aim of this essay is to broaden the popular conception of war to include sexual violence and shed light on war-related discourses concerning social and economic institutions and gender construction in both peace and war. Appropriate use of personal narratives can help to illustrate these connections. Personal narratives are often difficult to read, but it is through them that we can approach an understanding of the lived suffering of thousands of women. Doug Henry, 2006, refers to personal narratives as privileged forms of knowledge. By this, Henry, 2006, differentiates between knowledge derived from lived experience and knowledge derived through academic study. He further explains that one must be careful not to cloak human suffering in academic language or transform an understanding of violence into a rationalization for violence. Personal narratives remind us to be vigilant of that boundary, including the following experience told by a rape survivor from the Ugandan Civil War. I'm not excited to read this. I was 30 years old and married when I was gang raped. I had temporarily separated from my husband amidst fleeing and insecurity when the village was attacked by government soldiers. They cut some out. Ran into the bush where I met my first ordeal. 6 soldiers found me hiding and raped me one after another. Before I had recovered, I was again gang raped at a military checkpoint. This time I was raped by 15 soldiers. This left me shattered. I was once again torn to an extent that I could not control my biological functions. The cervix was dislocated and the uterus started hanging out. Whenever I'm bathing, I have to push it back in. The above narrative touches upon multiple themes packaged into war rape. The tendency for modern conflict to play out on the battlefield of women's homes and bodies. The vulnerability of women to rape in flight when they seek protection in refugee camps or neighboring towns. And the abject dehumanization of women that are appropriated as sex objects in the most heinous manner. In modern warfare, civilians increasingly find themselves caught in the front lines of battle. Estimates of the civilian death toll range from 75 to 90%, with the majority being women and children. The proximate convergence of combatants and civilians prompts Catherine Farr, 2009, to describe war rape as site ubiquitous, meaning that it occurs anywhere, including homes, streets, roadblocks, border checkpoints, detention centers, and refugee camps. Wow, I wonder why. Probably because men just do whatever the fuck they want, which includes raping, because that's what they want to do, because that's how they are. Okay. Numerous obstacles prevent a complete understanding of the amount of sexual violence in any particular conflict. During war, legitimate agencies cannot always be situated to collect data or receive reports. A significant barrier to reporting stems from women's internalization of guilt and shame as a result of cultural views that blame women for men's sexual deviance. The strong stigma associated with rape causes many women to fear being rejected by their husbands and community. Methods for data collection also vary considerably. Statistics on war rape generally overlook variations between number of victims and number of incidents, which is important in light of the fact that many women are often repeatedly raped. Rapes of women who are also killed are frequently missing from the data. Fully 25% of the indigenous Shan, I don't know if you say that like Shan or Shan, women raped by the Myanmar armed forces were also killed. As a result, figures for the prevalence of war rape vary widely. Nonetheless, they are still useful for understanding the scope of the violence, and for refuting claims that war rape is committed by a few rogue soldiers. For example, estimates on the number of Muslim women raped by Bosnian Serbs during the Civil War in the former Yugoslavia. Oh, sorry. It's hard to keep my space because of the way that this PDF is. Range from 20,000 to 60,000. Estimates on the number of Rwandan Tutsis raped by Hutus in 1994 range from 250,000 to 500,000. Figures for the number of women raped by Soviet forces in 1945 Berlin range from 20,000 to 100,000. Numbers increased to 2 million if one considers all of Eastern Germany. From 1971 to 1972, Pakistani soldiers raped approximately 200,000 Bangladeshi women. Approximately 94% of surveyed households reported sexual violence during the Sierra Leonean Civil War. Until recently, the international community remained silent on the prevalence of war rape. I'm sorry. Anna T. Hoagland, 2003, points to the public/private paradox of war rape. The sexual aspect of the violence, coupled with cultural taboos, confines war rape to the personal or private realm. Yet, its pervasiveness within and across conflicts places rape firmly within the scope of public violence. To ensure women's protection and women's justice, this paradox must be cast off. The Bassiouni report, produced by a United Nations investigator for the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, ICTY, represented a groundbreaking attempt to document war rape and formed a critical part of the ICTY's ability to prosecute rape as a war crime. Acknowledgement and documentation of war rape is the first step towards its prevention. Scholarship on the subject traces an arc from explanations that focus on individual behavior to feminist explanations that point to how cumulative social practices and institutions shape the collective and individual psyches that perpetrate war rape. Traditional discourse viewed the rape of enemy women as the victor's reward, or as a property crime violated against men. Article 27 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, adopted in 1949, states that women shall be especially protected against any attack on their honor, in particular against rape, enforced prostitution, or any form of indecent assault. Depicting rape and sexual violence as an attack on a woman's honor, rather than attack on her body, suggests that women have no recourse, I don't know how you say it, against attacks on their bodies, and that they do not own their bodies. The traditional view of war rape reifies an essentialist portrait that depicts aggressive and sexualized males sullying pure women. It reinforces cultural customs that prize women's sexual purity and which are strongly correlative with gender inequalities. Jonathan Gottschall, 2004, embraces the sociobiological view which explains war rape through a combination of male sexual desire and environmental influences. This perspective claims that sexual desire underlies war rape, since anecdotal evidence suggests that young, reproductive age women are the primary targets. He further argues that war rape must be natural because of its cross-cultural manifestation and prehistoric origin. When soldiers refrain from raping women, socio-cultural forces are preventing them from acting on their otherwise natural inclination to rape. Thwarted or repressed sexual desire may form a component of some incidences of war rape. What Farr refers to as opportunistic rape. Men are opportunistic rapists. But it does not account for the massive scale of war rape. Rape makes a literal and symbolic statement that denies a woman her personhood. In each case, something else functions to undergird soldiers' belief that it is acceptable to rape women by force. Sociobiologists may be confusing sexual desire for a motivational factor when it is more an operational necessity. Moreover, research suggests that all women and girls of all ages are victims of war rape. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, females aged 5 to 80 suffered gang rapes and had their genitalia punctured with foreign objects. Hines, 2004. In Liberia, 50% of women aged 15 to 70 experienced rape or physical abuse during the 1989 to 1997 civil conflict. Ruth Seifert, 1996, responds to the sociobiological view with rape studies that consistently show that desire for power and domination over the victim trumps sexual desire as the motivation to rape. Michael Kimmel, 2008, argues that cross-cultural studies... Sorry. My dog's over there. She sounds like she's going to throw up. This is a really long thing. I'm not going to edit it. I'm sorry. I'm going to get better at this. I swear to God. I swear to God. Argues that cross-cultural studies provide evidence that gender inequality is the primary predictor of gender violence, which clearly includes sexual violence by men against women. Thus, sexual violence is not hinged on biological drives, but on social constructions of gender and sexuality. In the context of war, sexual violence tends to be enacted by groups with multiple layers of personal and collective meaning. The scope of war rape, documented in Rwanda and the former Yugoslavia, prompted scholarly and popular discourse to frame war rape as strategic military policy. Rape as a weapon or strategy of war represents an important paradigm shift that places sexual violence at the center of scholarly discourse regarding war ethics and the perils faced by females in modern conflict. Framing war rape as an instrumental act versus an essentialist or incidental act. Jesus Christ, my dog. I'm sorry. I'm not re-recording this. Next time I won't have her in the room. She's over there. It really gets under my nerves, but I love my dog. Jesus Christ, I'm trying to read about rape. Framing war rape as an instrumental act versus an essentialist or incidental act is the gateway through which we can deconstruct the mechanisms which underlie its use. In 1975, Susan Brown Miller first drew attention to the instrumental use of rape in her book, Against Our Will, Men, Women, and Rape. Brown Miller writes that man's discovery that his genitalia could serve as a weapon to generate fear must rank as one of the most important discoveries. Brown Miller later qualified some of her controversial statements and alleged that even though not all men rape, all men benefit from the actions of rapists because women's fear of being raped prevents them from challenging the patriarchal order. Brown Miller's theory is evident in the recent spate of retaliatory rapes in the West African nation of Guinea. On September 8, 2009, members of the Guinea Armed Forces reacted to women's political protests with rampant and violent rapes in broad daylight. One woman reported being told by a soldier who raped her that a woman's place is in the home, and that the rapes were intended to intimidate women into surrendering their shred of political power to the men in charge of the country. In the former Yugoslavia, the war rape committed by Bosnian Serb soldiers exemplifies sexual terrorism, since the primary, although indirect, targets were the male enemy soldiers. Rape became a way to humiliate enemy forces through their inability to protect the community. From Yugoslavia to the DRC, extensive war rape destroys the social fabric because raped women are frequently ostracized by their communities. Shanks and Scholl, 2000. That was just another citation. Still, locating proof of war rape's official sanctioning is extremely difficult. The clearest evidence comes from Rwanda, when Hutu leaders gave explicit orders for their soldiers to rape Tutsi women. As a result, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, the court charged with prosecuting war crimes committed during the 1994 Civil War, characterized the widespread rape of Tutsi women as genocidal rape. However, Doris Buss, 2009, cautions against ceasing our analysis of war rape at the point of genocidal or strategic rape. By framing rape as a weapon that one side uses against another, we enact a rape script that naturalizes sexual violence and ignores rapes that contradict the rape script. According to the record for the ICTR, genocidal rape is defined as a crime against a particular group, Tutsi women. It therefore renders some of the sexual violence invisible. For example, the rape of Hutu women, Tutsi men and boys, and young Hutu boys who were punished for resisting acts of violence. Although these rape dynamics did not occur along the same magnitude as did the rapes of Tutsi women, it is troubling that the victims were ignored by the ICTR. The concept of strategic or genocidal rape is an improvement on sociobiological theory, but it still misses the deeper truth that cultural norms about women's bodies and women's sexuality underlie the use of rape as a viable or effective weapon. Consistent with Mukamana and that one's hard. Brissywig? I don't know. I'm gonna post all of that at the end. It'll be in the video. It is the public ownership of women's sexuality that makes it possible to translate an attack against one woman into an attack against an entire community. Wow. It is the public ownership of women's sexuality that makes it possible to translate an attack against one woman into an attack against an entire community. Macro-level social systems that subordinate women become misogynistic when internalized and acted out with sexualized brutality. Seifert, 1996, emphasizes the hostility towards women that becomes evident when the most vicious forms of war rape concentrate on the uniquely feminine parts of the body. Women whose breasts are sliced off, stomachs slashed open, and vaginas brutalized during or after the rape. The 200,000 women and girls kidnapped by the Japanese armed forces for sexual slavery during World War II were mutilated to prevent pregnancy, thus making them constantly available, and were referred to as war supplies. Parallel with this dynamic is the appropriation of women's bodies as symbols for the larger tribal/ethnic/religious or political collectivity. Women's bodies are targeted for sexual violence as combatants attempt to wreak havoc on the existing social fabric and inscribe a new social and political ideology. A consistent theme throughout is the abrogation of women's full selfhood and the characterization of women as property, whether they belong to their husbands, fathers, communities, or the enemy. A recent and revealing study connected the extant economic and political conditions with entrenched cultural norms and the gendered strain produced by prolonged armed conflict. Maria Boz and Maria Stern, 2009, analyzed war rape and masculinity through interviews with members of the Congolese state armed forces, one of the main perpetrators of rape in the fragile country's long civil war. The soldiers identified two types of rape, lust rape and evil rape. Lust rape is associated with male sexual desire and viewed by soldiers as more excusable than evil rapes. However, the interviews draw attention to a deeper motivation that is reflected by the soldiers' feelings of failure to embody the prescribed expectations of militarized masculinity. The idealized portrait of the masculine soldier combines sexual potency with the provision of material wealth for the family. Women are expected to provide sexual favors in return for material goods, meaning that their sexuality is defined in service of men, and for a price. In the context of a dysfunctional and corrupt military institution, soldiers often go unpaid, which leaves their families bereft of support and women with little obligation to satisfy their husband's sexual desire. Hence, the ideal militarized masculinity is unattainable given the conditions in which the soldiers live. Persistent poverty, fueled by war and backed by patriarchal or racist rationalizations, breaks down social control mechanisms that usually guard against massive sexual violence. Drawing upon beliefs that women ought to sexually fulfill men, rape serves to reinforce their masculinity as the sexually potent fighter. That women do not own their sexuality or control over their bodies is exemplified in an account given by one soldier who claimed that a rape victim should have agreed to have sex with at least one or two of the soldiers who gang raped her. In peacetime, rape is considered an aberration. In war, it is normal. This war-normative view of rape is not confined to the DRC. Similar sentiments were reported by local villagers in I can't pronounce that. It sounds French. Evil rape is viewed as distinct from lust rape because, as one soldier reflects, if it is only lust, then why do you sometimes kill her? Evil rape is born from anger that is then directed at the enemy population through its women, often committed in the fog of drugs and alcohol. But the soldiers' themes of poverty, frustration, and sense of powerlessness that underlie evil rape are the same as those that underlie lust rape, even though they are interpreted differently by the soldiers interviewed, by the rapists interviewed. The explanation for both types of rape are molded out of particular gendered discourses, which combine unattainable ideals of masculinity, sexualized femininities, failing socioeconomic institutions, and a corrupt military, all within the context of a bloody and protracted civil war that has claimed 5.4 million lives. The research conducted by Boz and Stern, 2009, is extremely useful for highlighting how larger societal processes often get obscured in the analysis. Meredith Turshen argues that sexual violence has social, political, and economic roots. In her assessment of war rape committed during the Ugandan Civil War, Turshen points to the history of colonial practices that engendered regional and ethnic rivalries. Hostilities are further complicated by present-day transnational entities that mandate structural adjustment programs, divert money away from essential social programs, interfere in the political process, and sell weapons. The recent war in Uganda pits the Ugandan government forces in alliance with the rebel Sudanese People's Liberation Army against the rebel Lord's Resistance Army, which is allied with the Sudanese government. Women are targeted as the wives and mothers of enemy soldiers, punished as gendered vessels for factional reproduction. This twisted logic also provides the indefensible justification behind appropriating women in the sexual service of the enemy group. The commoditization of women is indicated in the following narrative from Uganda. In the dawn of peace, governments have to determine how to provide justice for past atrocities, while ensuring that the concept and practice of justice is enfolded into future governance. What law professor Martha Minow eloquently calls steering a path between too much memory and too much forgetting. The importance of prosecuting rape as a war crime should not be underestimated, but prosecution's preventative strength is limited. A feminist theory of war rape emphasizes the structural arrangements that form the foundation for sexual violence, and so reconstituting these arrangements assumes critical importance. Numerous authors agree that gender inequalities are a predictor of armed conflict, which in turn predicts sexual violence. Mary Caprioli tests this hypothesis using the Militarized Interstate Dispute Dataset, which maintains records of 2,187 international disputes involving 159 states. Her study design calculates gender equality in terms of social equality, determined by fertility rates, which are closely linked with female social status, political equality, with respect to the percentage of women in parliament and the number of years since women were given the right to vote, and economic equality, indicated by the percentage of women in the labor force. The dependent variable, state militarism, was assessed using a hostility level that ranged from 1, absence of state militarism, to 5, outright war. Using sophisticated statistical analysis, Caprioli presented her findings in a digestible two-state comparison. Although the results are premised on international disputes, they offer important guidance for mitigating both civil and cross-border disputes. The domestic inequalities that Caprioli, 2000, cites are I never know how to say this word, analogous, analogous to those that render women vulnerable to war rape in many conflict configurations. A comparable study conducted by Eric Melander in 2005 focused on intrastate conflict and found similar results. And you can just pause this, I guess, to read Table 1 and understanding the constellation of factors that produce war rape is vital for the enactment of sound policies. The policy implications that follow from Caprioli's study stress the need for stronger incentives to increase women's political participation, especially in light of the fact that most states contain a disproportionately small number of women in politics. The Melander study also shows a connection between women's political participation and gender equality. The connection did not appear to be predicated on a particular quota of female representation and was strengthened by the presence of institutional democracy. In Uganda, women perform 80% of the agricultural labor, but own as little as 7% of the land. Therefore, in certain regions, programs that advance women's property rights will help secure their economic independence. Most importantly, improving females' access to education increases their social status and economic independence. Implementing structural reforms may not prevent every instance of war or war rape, but it will undoubtedly help to repair the broken and failed systems that provide the fertile soil for misogynistic sexual violence to occur on a massive scale. At their core, egalitarian societies are modeled on norms of respect and reject the hierarchical structures that privilege or subordinate certain groups. In large part, this is why heightened gender equality is a predictor of internal and international peace, because it typically functions alongside general social equalities. This suggests that a grassroots approach to challenging gender inequalities must work alongside policy enactment. Policy mandates will only be successful when they are accompanied by efforts to change popular cultural norms and customs. Sally Engle-Mary, 2006, reminds us that privileged groups will resist the major social adjustments necessary to prevent gender and sexual violence. To that end, and in line with Melander, local non-governmental organizations are essential to the task of using local language. She put "of using" twice, so that's not my fault, because it says, are essential to the task of using, and then the next line, of using local language to challenge local customs. To advance, human rights language concerning the rights and protection of women must be encased within local contexts of power and meaning. Mary, 2006. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Sierra Leone, TRC, constituted in 2002, is one example of how local activists can challenge the deep-seated gender inequalities that contribute to rampant and violent war rape. The final report, produced by the TRC, embodied the feminist perspective and found that sexual violence was predicated on women's traditionally low social status, combined with men's perception of women as property and of symbols of collective honor. In response, the TRC mandated that women occupy 30% of parliamentary seats and struck down a variety of gender discriminatory laws concerning the right of women to inherit property. Hopefully, this effort by the TRC to spearhead important change will be backed up on the local level, in particular to promote education for women and girls. War rape is an act of unspeakable violence, but it is an act that draws its power from the social, cultural, political, and economic structures that frame our existence as gendered creatures. The sociobiological perspective peers through a very narrow lens at but one element of the individual and offers no evidence to explain why that individual crosses the line from consensual intercourse to rape. Strategic rape theory offers greater, yet not full, explanatory power, but as a standalone theory it offers little in the way of prevention. Feminist theory attempts to diffuse war rape at its source and tells us how. The analysis shows that gender inequalities increase the likelihood of armed conflict, and that armed conflict frequently results in sexual violence against women. It enlarges our sphere of understanding concerning the relationship between society, war, and gendered violence. Mitigating gender inequalities not only reduces the potential for armed conflict, but also reduces the likelihood that when conflict occurs, it will result in sexual violence. It is not a linear, but a multifaceted relationship. Importantly, the application of a feminist analysis of war rape exists beyond sexual violence in highly patriarchal societies and can be utilized to examine more nuanced gender inequalities. Making needed changes will not be easy. They will be resisted, but resistance is perhaps a sign that we are on the right track. Okay, so I'm going to post a link to like her sources, I guess. Well, I don't know, I'll figure that out later, but it'll all be in the description. And yeah, that was interesting and unsurprising. So there were different things I wanted to do on here, like read on here and talk about. And I ordered a book, Feminism and War, Confronting U.S. Imperialism. And I think I was going to do that next, but I don't know how long that one is. So I might have to do it like not in one long video, but a series. And I guess you put it in like a playlist or something, and then it's on your little YouTube thing. So if that is like a longer book, which I'm not even sure, if it is kind of long, I can do like, I'll turn it into an almost like a series or something. Yeah, I guess that's it. Of the next couple things I was thinking about reading, besides Feminism and War, was The Better Half on the Genetic Superiority of Women, which is actually written by a guy, I think. And then Feminism and Psychoanalytic Theory. And also, I'm probably going to read, before I even do any of that, depending upon how long it is, there's an article, Women and Hysteria in the History of Mental Health, which I found on some website. But I might do that as well. And there was something else. Oh, The Myth of Women's Masochism is another book. And I've posted some excerpts of it before when I was trying to, like, own the fucking sex-positive kinksters. But people don't really read those. I mean, some people do. But, I mean, I understand that kind of stuff can't always, like, it can't always hold your attention, I guess. And I have trouble with it, too. But anyway, I don't know why I'm continuing to talk. So I'm going to just end this video, I guess, now. And I will post, all the links to all this shit down in the description.